Okay. We'll open with a prayer, please. Ms. Bellinger.
This is a prayer from John Henry Newman, written in 1834. I thought it would be a wonderful one today. Lead kindly light amid the encircling gloom. Please, Lord, lead me on. The night is dark, we are far from home. Please, Lord, lead me on. Keep thou my feet. I do not ask to see the distant scene. One step is enough for me. I didn't used to pray this way, that you would lead me on. I love to choose and see my path, but now, Lord, lead me on. So please, Lord, take care of all the suffering people here and in our war-torn lands especially, and take care of all in our city and all of us who work for them. Help us to do your will today and always, and please, Lord, lead us on. We ask all of these things in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. I'll call the meeting to order. If you'll rise for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we'll move into our work session, number 3. And the first thing there is to receive the 2021 racial profiling report from our Chief Police, Seavey.
Mayor and Council, good evening. It is that time of year where you receive the 2021 contact report, commonly referred to as a racial profiling report. The police departments in law enforcement agencies across the state are expected to adhere to 7 standards when reporting information. I put those 7 standards in this presentation. And real briefly, standard 1, established in the Code of Criminal Procedure, established what we know as racial profiling today and prohibits racial profiling. It also established the ethnicities and races of how we report racial profiling. They are required categories, and an agency may include additional, but these are the mandatory categories. Standard 2 talks about a stop of a person. You have to collect certain types of information like physical description, reason for the stop. Was a search conducted? If so, was it a consent search? Contraband, was contraband discovered? Was probable cause? Search conducted if an arrest was made, where the stop was made, and was a citation or warning issued. Standard 3 deals with information that has to be gathered in accordance with the law. So the report that you received electronically, and I placed a printed copy of the report before you of the complete report. The content of that report is specifically dictated by law, and that's what Standard 3 goes into. Standard 4 talks about video and audio recordings. If you are an agency that has video and audio recordings, that you have to establish a minimum 90-day retention for the videos. And this is kind of an oddity. I sometimes get questions about this. You have to be able to provide a copy of the video to the officer if a complaint is filed. Well, the reason for that is under state law, officers are allowed to, and an individual must sign a complaint, a statement, if you will. And the officer has a right under state law to answer the allegation. So the officer must be given the material if a complaint is made. Under standards 5 and 6, talks about if you don't use recording equipment, what you have to do in order to comply with the law if you are an agency that doesn't have recording equipment. And again, requires minimum 90-day retention on audio and video. And just as also, if there's an active complaint, you keep that beyond the 90 days, that information. And a lot of times our audio and video contains evidence in cases that we're working. So those come under a whole different retention scheduling, and those are maintained. Standard 7 talks about citations. Have to have a particular form, make sure it's in compliance with transportation code, and whether that's electronic or paper. We use most of the time electronic citations, but sometimes electronics break down. So we also have paper citations. Both our electronic citations and paper citations are fully compliant with the law. In your copy of the Del Carmen report, which is quite lengthy, you have the Texas law on racial profiling all the way back to 2001, the Code of Criminal Procedure, Transportation Code, both House and Senate bills, and a copy of the full report from Del Carmen Consulting. As a summary of the report at the rear, you'll find that the police department, based on Del Carmen's investigations, is fully compliant with the law. A little bit on demographics. 2020 census, Nacogdoches population is about 33,200. The racial and ethnic composition of Nacogdoches is defined by law and has been reported as follows. We're about 51% white, 26.5% black, and then Native American Asian, 0.6 and 2.8%, 1.7 reporting 2 or more races, and 18.8 Latino. Getting into some of the charts and graphs. The first, this is slide number 11. Should have worn my reading glasses. I told myself to. Anyhow, 6,326 total contacts. So that's going to be a base number that we work with off and on throughout this report. And as you can see, 2,458 of those were contacts made with black, 2,626 white, 1,144 Hispanic, and then you've got 26 and 72 for Native American and Pacific Islanders. The percentages are and the numbers regarding verbal warnings, written warnings, and then those percentages go out to the right. So verbal warnings 3,415, written warnings 1,344, which comes out to 39% on contacts, 42%, 39% black, 42% white, 18% Hispanic. Oh, thank you. They're even colored. Anybody want? Now's the time for a picture. What would I do without her? And so by percent, again, the citation's 34% black, 45% white, 21% Hispanic. So out of that number, 6,326, those are the percentages of by race who got the citations. Of course, the verbal percent, 40, 40, and 18, and the written warnings, 39, 43, and 17%. All those numbers add up to 100%. So that's the breakdown by citations and tickets and warnings. Motor vehicle searches and arrests. 742 searches were conducted. And 222 were consent searches, 282 resulted in arrests. So as we go down, black searches on black individuals, 426, 78 were consent, and 147 resulted in an arrest. White, 222 searches were conducted, 100 were consent, 99 of those resulted in arrest. In Hispanics, 91 searches, 43 by consent, 33 were arrests. So that 742 total searches, 222 consent, 282 arrests were made. On the search, continuing on with search data, we go back to that 742 number, and we look at, first of all, was contraband found. 291% or 291 times contraband was found on searches of black individuals, 132 on white, and 55 on Hispanic. Well, that comes out to percent of contraband found. 61% of the time contraband was found when black individuals are searched, 28% white, 11% Hispanic, and percent of the times where no contraband was found, of course, 52, 34, and 14. Percent arrested, black 52, white 35, Hispanic 12%. Next, I think this is an interesting number and an interesting slide. Talks about total times officers knew the race or ethnicity of the individual before the stop was made. That comes out to about 8%. So a lot of people say 8%. I don't believe it. I think you know more often than that. A lot of people make that observation. Well, I put two pictures in here, a nighttime picture and one where the sun is glaring. So notice I put on this slide, at the time the decision was made to make the stop. You're out running radar, that vehicle may be a block or more away from you. Or you may see a car across an intersection or down the road. It may be nighttime, there may be bad weather. There's all kinds of reasons, but most of the time, officers don't know. They can't identify that driver before they made the decision to stop. So you make that decision when you see a speeding vehicle, a vehicle running a red light, or whatever the case may be. Now, are you going to know the ethnicity or the race before you actually make the stop? Well, you may, but you've already made the decision to make the stop. So it's when you get a closer approach that you begin to pick up on more visual cues. But as far as seeing a person, being able to identify them by race or ethnicity and deciding beforehand, doesn't happen a lot. And I have a remedy for people who think that's not a good number, and I'll talk about that later on in the presentation. Number of times force was used that resulted in injury during a motor vehicle contact. We had none. Now that's an unusual number because usually we have one or two. You know, somebody wants to fight. They're getting arrested. Maybe it's a warrant. Maybe it's contraband was found in their vehicle, and don't blame them. I've been in lots of jails over the course of my career, and I have not found a pleasant one yet. So maybe they don't want to go, and they want to fight a little bit. Well, I'll tell you, what impresses me about this number is that we have gone to a great extent to train our officers in de-escalation techniques, communication techniques, and we would rather talk our way into a compliant individual than fight our way into compliance. And I think this is an indication that I didn't expect a zero, but I'm pleased that we got it. So now, have there been some confrontations? Sure, verbal confrontations, and maybe a little bit of hands-on, leading, guiding, or whatever, but as far as a use of force incident that created an injury, we had none in 21. So very, very pleased with that. So there was one racial profiling complaint in 2021. The officer was exonerated. The contact was a result of a violation of law. And upon investigating that contact, there was no indication of bias exhibited. So how are those complaints received, and how do we deal with them? Well, here's how you can complain, whether it's racial profiling or whether it's rudeness or whether it's a person not doing their job right or whatever. You can complain in person, either at the police department or at a place of your choosing. You can complain over the phone. You can complain electronically by email. You can complain by filling out a form that is in the lobby of the police department. And yes, I checked, and they are there today. And you can complain by speaking to any employee of the police department. Now, I have a little tag under there that says orientation. Everybody that comes to work at the police department has to spend about an hour with me before they're allowed to do anything. They don't even get their ID cards made. And I go through orientation with them, and I talk about their responsibilities to the community. I talk about their responsibilities if someone comes up to them and says, I think that you guys are doing the wrong thing and I want to file a complaint. I tell them, you have an obligation to stop everything and take care of that complaint by calling a supervisor. And a supervisor who was not involved in the incident will come to the scene and will begin immediately working through that complaint. A lot of times it's miscommunication, misinformation, or people are just angry over the situation. But sometimes it goes on beyond that. And we are always ready to provide the documentation in order for a person to file that complaint. And I tell people, don't tell them to call internal affairs Monday morning. Don't tell them somebody will call them. Don't tell them somebody will get a hold of you at some point down the road. It has to be handled right now. I want there to be a sense of urgency when an individual feels like a member of the department has done something wrong. And I communicate that to every single employee, not just officers, but also non-licensed folks that work for us. How else are complaints received? Well, I've done this many times. I will meet you at your house. I will meet you at a restaurant. I will meet you in a park. Starting to sound like a Dr. Seuss book, but that's how it goes. You may bring a witness. You may bring an advocate, a friend, a lawyer, whoever you wish, and we'll work through the process. If you're not comfortable speaking to me, or my professional standards investigator, I will assign someone different. You can always call city manager's office, and complaints are taken here at 559-2501. Ask for Mario. And you can file a complaint through the city manager's office or anywhere else, and we'll make that happen for you. It's time for me to put my bumper sticker out here now. I believe this, I teach it, and I demand it. I don't need officers so bad that I need bad officers. So I take these complaints very seriously. We work them through thoroughly, and it's a one-to-one relationship. The investigator doesn't report to anyone except me. And I receive the documentation on that complaint, I read it, and yes ma'am.
I think the city manager is
And I just wanted to say, in regards to Chief Seavey mentioning about taking complaints, sending them to the city manager, the one that we received actually did come through my office. And so we were able to immediately send it over to, at the time, Acting Chief Taravella, and it was handled immediately, so.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay.
I really like the Dr. Seuss part, in the park or in the dark or in a chair or anywhere.
Anywhere. The fact is that I'm interested in providing the best service that we possibly can. And part of that is making people feel like they have a voice. And so that's very, very important to me. What can you expect from an investigation? Well, you'll be interviewed. You will be asked to sign a formal statement. That's a requirement by law. Now, if you choose not to sign a formal statement, that doesn't mean we're not going to investigate it. It just means that we have to change how we conduct an investigation, because the officer that gets complained on by law is entitled to have a signed complaint that they can read and respond to. The complaint will be assigned to an investigator or a supervisor. All audio, all video, the radio traffic 911 call that is recorded, all this will be reviewed and retained. And by the way, you're welcome to come into my office and watch it and listen to it. Everything. We really have no secrets. Any witnesses will be interviewed. You can, well, there it is. You may watch the video or listen to the audio. Ultimately, a finding will be made. We have 4 findings: exonerated, unfounded, not sustained, and sustained. Exonerated means, yep, it happened, it sure did, but it needed to. So you complained on an officer who did something, but what they did is proper and necessary. Unfounded means that the incident reported didn't even happen at all. There's no evidence to suggest that the complaint is true. And since we live our lives on video and audio, that's usually a pretty easy finding. Not sustained means we can't tell. I hate these. That's a he said, she said. Nobody walks away happy from these, but it rarely happens, but it does on occasion. And then sustained means that the complaint was true, and that the complaining party had a legitimate complaint that came out to be a true complaint. You will be informed in writing of that conclusion, and where necessary, in the form of a sustained complaint, and sometimes even a not sustained, because sometimes it might suggest that we might look at our policy or procedures. Corrective action is taken. Sometimes that's disciplinary action. Sometimes it's a policy change or a procedural change of some sort. And then major investigations are referred to a state agency for investigation. That might be a criminal accusation, a serious use of force incident, a shooting. We have a very good relationship with Texas Rangers, and I got them on speed dial. So we'll call in a state agency to conduct those serious investigations. Summary, Del Carmen Consulting found Nacogdoches Police Department is compliant with state law and has shown a history of compliance. If you have additional questions, there is Dr. Del Carmen's contact information, his phone number, and his email address. And I spoke to him personally, and he is fine with anybody who has questions about the work that he does. Feel free to give him a call. What if I want to know more? Well, there's my direct office number, 559-2601, and happy to visit with anybody. You can always attend the Citizens Police Academy. We hold these annually. Sergeant Brett Ayers takes care of those and gets everything lined up for us, 559-2618. You can come down and just sit down and visit if you want to. 312 West Main. You don't have to have an appointment. If you want to call ahead to make sure somebody's there, that's not a bad idea. But if you walk in and I'm there, I will stop what I'm doing and meet with anybody that wants to. And here's where I said, let's figure out just how difficult it is to see sometimes out there. Come down, take a ride. Sit in the front seat of that patrol car and watch what happens. When I was a little baby cop, about that big, little tiny thing, I sat in a patrol car. It had a 2-channel radio and 2 flip switches in it. One was a siren and one was the lights, and that was it. And when your red lights got cold in the wintertime, you had to roll your window down and bang on them while you drove down the street because of the grease in the chain. The little motors couldn't make them turn. I swear sitting in a patrol car today is like sitting in a space shuttle. I don't even know how to turn the stuff on. And I have a very simple car that I ride around in. I think they did that for me intentionally. And but when you sit in the front seat of these patrol cars, it's a whole different experience. And we have just a real quick background check we have to do on people. It's real simple and not hard to get through it. It takes just a couple of minutes, and then we will put you in the front seat of a patrol car, and you can go out and watch these officers work and watch what they do. It is not an easy job because most of our contacts are stressful. Again, back when I was a little baby cop, my mom said, "Hey, come by for lunch." And I said, "Okay, I can do that." So I drive up to her house and I park in front of her house. She comes to work running outside. She said, "Would you pull around back?" And I said, "Well, I can't, Mom, but why?" And she said, "I don't want the police. I don't want my neighbors to think the police are at my house." And I said, "Well, Mom, the police are at your house. I'm your son." And but she made me pull around back. I understand that what we do is stressful, and it makes people feel stressed. How many times have you driven down the road and you see those red and blue lights coming at you in the opposite direction? I do it. My foot tends to hover over the brake even if I'm going below the speed limit. So we realize that, and we try to train our officers to deal with situations and with people in a positive way and in a way that de-escalates the situation, makes people feel comfortable. Doesn't always work, but we sure try hard to make it that way. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Okay. I think first we'll take public comment. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, then I will open it up to the council. Anyone questions for the chief? Mr. Anderson?
Not at this point. I may have one in a moment, though.
Okay. Ms. Fisher?
Sure. Thank you so much, Chief Seavey. I want to first say that physical force number was also impressive, and so I wanted to praise you and the police department for your efforts on de-escalation and communication.
Thank you.
Out of curiosity, both the physical force question and the question where it asks whether the officer knew the race of the person they were stopping before the stop, how is that information gathered? Is that something that the police officer writes in a
At
report?
the time of the stop, before the stop is concluded, the officer has to fill out a whole series of observations, and that's one of them at
Okay.
that time.
Okay,
As far as the, I could show you this, we have every year, surely I brought it. We do two major reports. One is a pursuit, an annual report on pursuits, and, which I thought I had. And, but I can certainly send it to you and provide it to you. It's an annual report on pursuits. We discuss the pursuits. Here's what happens. And a use of force, same thing. When a pursuit occurs or a use of force incident occurs, a supervisor is immediately assigned to it. They respond to the scene. They conduct an investigation. They document, and it's a very thorough documentation process. We reserve, even though there may not be any allegations of wrongdoing, we still preserve the video, we preserve the audio, and then at the end of the year, even though every single pursuit and every single use of force has gone through a chain of command review, all the way up to me, and I read through it and I approve it or don't approve it, we do an annual examination where we go in and we look at what we're doing, and we see if we need to change policy, change procedures. Can we identify weaknesses in our training? What can we do to do better? And we've done that every year for years. We are, and you're going to hear more about this probably in a couple of weeks. We are a recognized agency and have been for over a decade. And so we have to adhere to a higher set of standards than most agencies in this state. 1,300 agencies and about 170 are recognized, and we're one of those. You can take recognized away and put accreditation in there. We're an accredited agency through the Texas Police Chiefs Association. So yes, all of those things are investigated at the time they occur. Photographs are taken, videos are retained, and witness statements are taken. It's a full-blown investigation.
what triggers that is the police officer saying physical force was involved.
Well, either the police officer can self-report, which is most of the time what happens, or an individual who's the subject of the arrest can complain.
Okay.
And most of the time, you know what's happening because somebody gets on a radio and says, "Send me help, send me help." So I mean, that's that's an
Good
indication.
indicator.
Yeah, pretty obvious.
So I know that the census numbers were mentioned for Nacogdoches County, 51% white, 26.5% black, et cetera. But when the numbers are crunched in terms of percentages on the stops, contacts, and the searches, those percentages aren't by percentage of population, they're percentage of those raw total numbers,
Right.
correct?
Right.
Okay. So the reason that I don't like that, or why I would like some additional information, is because when you look at so for example, on the stop numbers, it looks like raw numbers wise, you stop almost as many black people as white people, but that's not in context. I think it was like the 2,400, the all contact 2,400 versus 2,600, give or take. But what's missing there for me is context in terms of the percentage of the population. And that math isn't done here. In the same vein, I think the search numbers, the raw numbers for black people being searched is almost twice that of white people being searched, even though they're a much lower percentage of the population.
Correct.
And so the way that I have an issue with the way that that the data is presented, because I don't think that it provides a full and accurate picture. And this is something that was brought up last year, and you were not here. We missed you
Right.
last year,
Right.
but we had Chief Taravella and Assistant Chief Taravella and Assistant Chief Weems, and I think we ended up having a very productive dialogue with a citizen who has come every year that I've been on council, at least. And it ended up being a really productive discussion, in my opinion, that resulted in at least one follow-up meeting. And so maybe this is something that I need to ask either Mario or Assistant Chief Taravella about what came out of that, because one of the issues that was highlighted was what I'm talking about, with not feeling like I don't have an accurate picture because of the way the information is presented and because it's missing the number crunching in terms of percentages of populations. Am I making sense? Okay, because when I start talking math, my brain starts cross-wiring and I don't.
agree.
So one thing that I would request of staff is that either, I don't know if this is something that Mr. Del Carmen would be able to add to the report, or if we can have some particularly math savvy person on staff take the raw numbers that we have here and present it to council, but that's a specific ask that I'm making.
Well, you want me to answer that? We contacted, Dr. Del Carmen, and, I think there was an individual mentioned last year that might be able to do what has been referred to as a deep dive into these numbers. As it turns out, he is associated with Dr. Del Carmen. And, so, we felt like that would just, that we were just gonna get kind of a
Same.
product, the same product.
Right.
So, 2-3 weeks ago, I talked to Dr. Del Carmen and I asked him, is there a way that you can further and deeper examine these numbers and provide better numbers? And he said he could. He wanted to wait until after this period of time when all these reports, because he does a lot of business time of year. So what I'm going to do is contact Dr. Del Carmen, probably be about April or so, and I'm gonna get a proposal from him on him taking a deeper look at our numbers and trying to provide that information. And I would certainly include you in on that conversation.
Thank you.
And the rest of the council.
Yeah.
Can I ask just a clarifying question too, if I may? So, Councilmember, is the question just a formatting of the table that shows, Chief, could you go back one slide? Is the formatting the concern? In other words, if you go to the previous slide, it shows, or at least one of the slides, it shows the demographic breakdown of our population here in Nacogdoches. Is the concern that this information is not embedded in the subsequent tables? Is that really what's
Yeah, but
throwing
that's
you?
not a formatting question, that's a lack of information question.
Right, but I mean, I guess from a formatting, if that column was in the tables, would that help clarify some of the?
Yeah, I think that'll be a more appropriate picture
Okay.
because it's not, we're missing
Understand.
part of the story.
So I think one of the questions, Chief, that we might need to ask Mr. Del Carmen is, because a lot of this is prescribed by state law.
Right.
And so I guess the question is, do we have the latitude as an agency from a reporting perspective to add that column, the column that you're showing right there, into the other reports to kind of do the breakdown of the?
I think we can add whatever information that we want to, that we think might more suit the situation and answer, clarify questions. As long as we get the basic fundamental information down required by the state, we can add to that what we want to, and I'll certainly go over that with Dr. Del Carmen.
I think
Thank you.
it's table 5 on page 20, and it's percent of searches. And I think what Ms. Fisher's asking for is that percent of searches be percent of total population, as opposed to percent of.
Total
searches.
search.
Maybe add that in addition.
Well, yeah, like an
Like an
extra
additional-
column
Yeah,
that
that- yeah.
embeds what Mario said, that embeds, and math stats people know this, but that embeds percentage of the population into those numbers. Because then we're able to, and then additionally, I guess, not just in terms of percentage, but something else that I would request then is a column that would compare those to each other.
So essentially, you want to know how many of those 32,300, you want it broken down by the population of the city.
If I could interject something here, if that's all right with you. In the child welfare system, we have been doing this for a number of years. It's called a racial disproportionality measure, and that's what you're asking for, is in proportion to the population, how do these reflect?
Yes.
And I can provide you with 3 different formulas, and they're very easy to do. We have chapters on it. it's not hard.
I'd
You
buy
don't
you
have to
lunch,
be in
I'd
this.
buy you
probably
lunch
hard
if
for
you do
me.
the calculation.
I could probably do them right now, but I'm not gonna, I wanna make sure, cause
Yeah.
there are different ways that actually skew it, and we actually have 3 different formulas that we use, but it's a very helpful tool. I think you're right, because some you can show that it's a 2-to-1 proportion, and one's a proportion and one is, a different percentage. But-
Okay.
But I'd be happy to meet with both of you and just show you what they do in child welfare to measure this and to track it and see if we're improving or what we're doing,
Yep.
you know.
Yeah, that would
Really.
be, that.
I don't
that-
think you need to pay a consultant for this, is all I'm trying to tell you. You don't,
I don't disagree. I don't think.
yeah.
I don't disagree. I don't think we need to. I think it was just, part of it is just based on state law. Can we, just from an advice perspective, but really it's just, again, I know I called it format, you're talking about different data. It's just how it's shown. I guess it's really,
Well, there are 2 things, how it's calculated, because it
Yeah.
is tricky.
Yeah.
And the other is how it's shown, and it's
Correct.
my understanding that you don't even have to show this to us, correct? I mean, this is,
I have to send it to the state, which that's been done. It's on file with TCO, and anybody wants to, can go to TCO website and pull this whole report. And then I have to deliver it to you guys, but we are not required by law to do a public meeting on it. It's not required. We do it because we think it's important. So,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, that.
so if that's okay with you, I'll just do
No,
it tomorrow.
More
because
data is good, yeah.
It's really not any, it's just a different presentation. It's taking, it's taking the percentage of the population and embedding the actual actions in.
Yeah.
I would certainly appreciate
Yeah,
it.
One thing I noticed in here with the numbers sort of related to this is that the number of searches is far more disproportionately black. The number of arrests resulting from searches is much higher for white. I'm not sure what the term is, but for whites who are stopped, the high, it's much higher there, which suggests that maybe possibly a shift in perspective with that information in mind. Yeah.
Yeah, and even just, I mean, and you're saying disproportionate, but that's even just looking at the raw numbers, not at
Yeah,
the.
I mean, this is just raw
So,
numbers.
'cause
Being
the-
able to digest those better would be very helpful, yeah.
Because there's, so 426 searches for black people and 222 for white, and that's not taking into account the percentage of the population. And so the information or the piece of the puzzle that I'm missing, just to be clear, is just based on those raw numbers, it would seem like if you are black, you are twice as likely to be searched, just based on those raw numbers alone. But that's missing the percentage of the yeah.
Differential in the population.
Yeah.
When we get up.
Okay, and then the last question I wanted to ask was whatever came of the follow-up meeting or meetings, and I would have liked to have been the one that I think Assistant Chief Taravella, didn't you meet with the community member who had come to the meeting and raised some concerns? Didn't,
Sorry.
Sorry.
Talking about Mr. Garrigan.
yeah,
I met with Mr. Garrigan probably a few weeks after the presentation was made by Assistant, or at the time, Acting Chief Weems. We visited, had a good visit with Mr. Garrigan. It's been a while, but we had a good visit with him, or I had a good visit with him, and he stated his concerns and just some of the concerns historically, what's been shown here in Nacogdoches and what's been shown in other parts of the state. He did make a suggestion of one thing that the council, or excuse me, the police department could do is do a much more in-depth analysis, and was willing to provide us with a name of a consultant, which was
Which was
provided.
the guy who
Yes,
works,
yes,
yeah.
ma'am. And so, and again, just doing that research with the name that was given, because again, he had some confidence issues with the consultant that we use. But then when you do the research, when we did the research of the name that Mr. Garrigan provided us, he was also associated with Mr. Del Carmen. So it was, I had a difficulty trying to connect the dots as to how do we use a consultant that's connected with the consultant we already use. And so we did reach out to Dr. Stewart, which was the recommended gentleman, and did receive a proposal. It was extremely expensive to do that. And then obviously was also on the phone with Dr. Stewart and Dr. Del Carmen at the same time. So it was just an unusual way to get to the same data that we use the consultant anyway. So I really wasn't quite sure how to make that connection and really offer a good recommendation on how to proceed with doing a deep dive for the cost using a consultant that was recommended by a resident, and a sub-consultant is the consultant that we use. So it was just awkward.
Yeah, I get that. That makes sense. Well, once we get the missing data, if it's possible, I mean, I don't know when it could be scheduled, but to maybe have another session to look at it, because it's hard to get a full picture and to really digest and discuss in a productive way when I feel like we're missing important information. If you would be okay with that, Chief.
Sure,
Okay,
sure.
I'm done.
We'll
Okay, thank you.
we'll
Mr.
make
Bowman.
it happen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes, sir.
I still have an issue with the 8%. And I understand about the weather conditions day or night. But to stop over 5,000 people and not know what the ethnic background they're from just boggles my mind. I mean, is it that you knew the color of their skin, you didn't know if they was Hispanic, black, or Asian, but you knew they was white, and that's where the other 8% come in. I just, it's hard for me. I know, is the majority of searches done, I mean, the majority of stops done in day, a night? Is there a percentage, does that break down?
Not by time of day, no,
Okay,
no.
all right. And
We may be able to go into the actual citations and pull them individually and look at the time on them. We may be able to, and we can certainly do that. It'd be time consuming, but it can be done in that manner.
I mean, that 8% is just boggles my mind.
Well, I knew it would, that's why I brought it up, and a lot of people talk about that, and that's why I offer, let's go out and take a ride, and then let's, set a distance, a half a block, or whatever, and, just, put it to the test. I'm sure okay with that.
Dr. Dale Carmen, he just look at the data that you provide for him?
Right.
Does he speak to officers, or is just directly with the staff?
He does not speak to officers. Now, he will talk to various staff members requesting information, but does he come out and actually interview officers and talk to them about their daily work, things like that? No, sir, he does not.
So he's just going strictly on the data that the admin staff provide to him?
Right.
No officers input. That's another issue I have as to for first-hand information. Yeah, I don't know, maybe it's, he can't talk to the officer, but I sure would like for him to have the officers to have further input to this data. Now, on the search data, I noticed that there was no column to indicate whether the search was consent or not. In the past,
On slide number 12, consent searches are listed.
searches, what,
Searches by
Search.
consent on
but
slide number.
no percentage-wise, I guess I could figure out. I was looking for what percent.
Well, it's not actually a percent, it's actually the raw number, so we can figure the percent quite easily if you'd like me to do that.
No, I'll get a calculator later.
Okay,
Okay.
but yes, sir, that's on slide 12.
Now, citations and warning. the stops between black and white is almost equal, a couple hundred off, maybe.
Yes, sir.
But the citations is a great amount for whites than blacks. Is it that the other 270, 267 really shouldn't have been stopped? There was no citation issue?
Well, if a citation isn't issued, it could be a written warning, a verbal warning.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're investigative stops where it's not a traffic issue, but we get all kinds of calls, attempt to locates on vehicles by descriptions and things like that. Suspect vehicles, sometimes welfare checks, things like that. They're still recorded as a stop, even though a citation may not have been issued.
Yeah, the verbal warnings is pretty close to being the same, percentage-wise and raw data.
Yes, sir.
And that's okay. I'm okay right now.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Ms. Bellinger?
I just wanted to say, in 1996, the head of the region in child welfare called me because we had a contract, the university had a contract with them to help them with their training, and asked, why are there so many African-American children in our child welfare system? And so at that point is when we started actually in this region, and then it went through the whole state, tracking racial disproportionality. And some of the same issues that are faced in the child welfare system, I believe, probably are faced in keeping the whole population safe, how to keep children safe and how to keep the population safe. So before I actually do the disproportionality calculations, these look like about the same as what happens in the child welfare system after years of addressing how to take apart racial disproportionality and how to address it. And one of the ways I was very impressed is how you limit discretion, and your training materials were very important about analyzing the reasons for the stops and training new officers, and I assume that your officers have updated training.
Yes.
Right. And I think that was one of the best ways that the child welfare system used to address it. So I was very pleased to see that part in there. And any way I can help in this, I really appreciate the transparency. I appreciate that that you and our police department shares this information publicly in a public meeting, because that is not often the case. And that's actually part of what the state of Texas decided to do in their attempts to address racial disproportionality, is to hold public meetings and to gather input and to look at it. So I just applaud you, and I think they are kind of in line. There may be areas that I'd like to compare them with the child welfare system, because if there are ways that they're kind of out of whack, you might say, oh, wait a minute, maybe we have something in this particular area. But I don't know.
That's an interesting comparison, one I hadn't thought of, and,
Yeah.
and I think it could be, very illuminating on this. I would like to say that we meet an awful lot with our community, and we are called into neighborhoods to deal with problems a lot by the people who live in those neighborhoods. It's a tough job to try to deal with a lot of these neighborhood issues. And because officers are called into these areas, that's where they're driving into and out of, and they're observing violations, they're observing problems, and they're dealing with those problems. And you can look on a crime map, which I've got 2021 crime maps, and you can look at the hot spots, and you can see where we spend an awful lot of our time. And I don't know what, I really wish I could make sense of the disproportionate numbers, because so much of what we do is based on probable cause. And probable cause if the officer is trumping up probable cause, it's gonna end up in the courtroom. It's gonna be reviewed judicially in the courtroom. And, but I'm not a sociologist. I know this, that when people see something that needs to be handled and they don't know who to call, they dial 911. And then we have to figure out how to deal with it. And, if anybody can make sense of why these things are the way they are, I'll be the first one in line to buy the book.
I got a book, actually.
I bet you do.
So, but I do want to add two more things. One is, in case there's a researcher out there, I do know the difference between racial disproportionality and disparity of outcomes, and those are two different calculations, so I'll help.
That's exactly what I was thinking, so.
Okay, good. I thought I'd clear that.
Yeah, me too.
But the other is, I do know that the state of Texas, when they were addressing it, they did some things that they hoped would address it that actually put children in danger, because that's what we're talking about, is danger in both the child welfare system and in policing. So while we want to make sure that we address what needs to be addressed, we don't want to put people in danger.
Right, and I think two areas that we struggle with right now as a society: mental health and the economy.
Right.
And I think you probably find a pretty good correlation in there between the economy and what we see here, as well as mental health. Mental health has been ignored for so long, and we spend so much of our time on it. And I will be glad one day when somebody takes it seriously. And because, in all honesty, police officers are not. We're equipped for a different type of work. We do it because it's necessary, and because who else are you going to call? And I'm the chairman of the East Texas Regional Health Network, which covers a broad area, and we get a lot of communities together in one room, and I know you're aware of it. And but we develop collaborations between mental health providers and the public and law enforcement in a lot of different areas, and we struggle on how to take care of things, because there's just not enough facilities to deal with people who need help.
Okay, anyone else?
I do have one
Okay.
quick question. Just more of curiosity than anything, but what percentage of these stops generate video that can be reviewed later? Or I know pretty much all of the
Unless the
vehicles
camera
are-
breaks all of them.
Okay,
Every one of them. And
Yeah,
our supervisors watch video on their officers. It's available to them in the office. It's available to them in their cars.
Yeah.
And they review videos for two reasons. One, they just watch the officers work and see how they interact with the community. The other is they're reviewing videos with the purpose of preparing criminal cases, reviewing the videos to make sure that everything that needs to be in the report and the final product is actually there.
right.
And we preserve those.
Yeah.
Until we're given permission to what's that big word, Jan? Redact, refuse, kick out, throw out, destroy. Destroy is a good word. So.
Yeah. Well, but beyond that, I'd just like to say thank you, because every year that I have seen this report, it has gotten progressively better. There's always room for improvement, as you well know,
Yes.
and that I hope we can achieve with a little
Well,
further
that's
number
good to
crunching.
hear. I really appreciate that.
But I appreciate the fact that it consistently gets better, and the reporting of it gets better as well. So
Excellent. Thank
for
you
that.
very much.
Okay, we will move on to B, Natchitoches Police Department Community Outreach Program Report. Police Chief Seavey.
Okay, here we go. Community outreach. We have expanded this greatly over the past years. And I think we've got more outreach right now than we've ever had before. And so let's just take a trip through this. 4 broad categories: projects and programs. These are regular and formal events that we hold. well, I shouldn't have said events because events is the next one. An event is usually a one-time or a requested event, again. And then number 3, volunteerism, effort that may be related to the police department but are not compensated. And then boards and civic groups. As I said, I'm on the East Texas Regional Health Network. We've got members who are in Rotary and you name it, Love Inc. Just about every civic organization in the city, we have someone involved in that. Family Crisis and so many others. Projects and programs. Citizens Emergency Response Team. We have a very robust group of volunteers that we can call out. They help us with parades. They help us with large public gatherings. They even help us with crime scenes. We've had large crime scenes. We had one back at the soccer fields several years ago, and our CERT team came out and they staffed the perimeter of that scene and helped us keep people from walking into it. And now we're not going to put them in a dangerous situation where they're going to have to confront people, but this was a fairly calm kind of an event. If you're curious, sometime ask me, I'll tell you about it. But I really don't feel like bringing it up at this meeting right now. We're going to stay positive. And so that's our CERT team. National Night Out. We've done nothing but get bigger and bigger and bigger with National Night Out. So if you've gone to the event at the rec center, plus we have numerous neighborhood watches on National Night Out, so many that it's hard to staff officers who are going to these various locations for National Night Out. Last year we started the Teen Academy, and we're going to have it again this summer, but it's going to be expanded and bigger. And so we're trying to work with the youth because I think that's the best place to start to impact folks in our community and have positive interaction with the youth. Touch a Truck, we've been doing that for a long time. Lot Crew, doing that for a long time. Neighborhood Watches. Have Vacation House Watch. If you didn't know it, give us a call. Tell us you're going to be out of town, and we will send people by your house while you're gone. Officers will go by and we'll check your house. We'll do the best we can to make sure it stays secure. Got to answer a lot of questions because we certainly don't want to find your guy that mows your lawn face down in the dirt somewhere. But so we need to know things like that. Crime Stoppers, we're very involved in Crime Stoppers. Sergeant Brett Ayers runs that outfit for us. We have Project Lifesaver. This involves the CERT team and the police department, where individuals who are suffering from memory loss, dementia, and Alzheimer's, they wear a piece of equipment that if they walk away, we can bust out our piece of equipment and go find them. And so that's a great thing for our community. And then traffic enforcement announcement. I don't know if you pay attention to these or not, but we will actually tell you where we're going to work traffic. Because my goal is not to write tickets. My goal is compliance, voluntary compliance, and let's be safe. We're very concerned right now about the TxDOT workers out south of town, and we're going to start working that area too. We got a grant to staff officers to work some of these high traffic areas. So, events. May or may not know this, we go into churches and we provide churches with security training of various types. We have volunteers in public schools. We do citizen ride-alongs. We have an honor guard that's very active. Not only do they do public events, but they also do funerals. And our honor guard actually did a military funeral during COVID when the military folks couldn't show up to honor the veteran. So our honor guard did that on their behalf. And we do building tours. We're involved in Harold's House, which is fundraising, community neighborhood meetings, and line of duty deaths. Texas, not proudly, usually leads the nation in police officer line of duty deaths. And whenever we can, particularly when it's in this region, we'll send officers in our honor guard, if they're requested, to attend these funerals and honor these officers that are killed in the line of duty. Volunteerism, we do presentations to local schools, assist neighborhoods in repairing and rebuilding homes and churches. I wish I would've got some pictures of this, but there was a lady who needed some work on her doors and windows and needed a roof on her house. And officers volunteered their time, their tools, and their efforts, and they rebuilt this lady's house last year. And that goes on more often than you would think. We've had patrol ships who have adopted families for Christmas and provided food and gifts for them. And they do that because they went there on a call for service. And maybe there was an abusive situation there and we're able to clear that up, but they still can't have Christmas. So officers volunteered their time and their money, and they put together a holiday for these families. And we do school supply donations, and we help animal control with adoption programs. Boards and civic groups, Nacogdoches Senior Center, Rotary, Harold's House, Family Crisis Center, East Texas Health Network, SFA Booster Club, and so many more. Now, before you get on to my wife about sitting in Santa Claus's lap, let me tell you what happened. The guy who was supposed to be Santa Claus got bucked off of a horse and broke his back. And they asked me to be Santa Claus. So there you have it. Ho, ho, ho. New for 2022, Meet the Police. You're going to start seeing dates and locations. We've already had one where people can just come in, sit down. You want coffee? We'll buy you a cup of coffee. You want a glass of iced tea, which is the house wine of the South? I will buy you a glass of iced tea, and we'll sit and talk and visit, and we'll talk about problems, or we'll just sit and talk and just build relationships and positive relationships throughout the community. Children's birthday parties. This happened just recently. And you might want to get your tissue out because there was a child was going to have a birthday, and nobody showed up. So they called the police department, and our officers went out there and had birthday with this individual. So about a month ago, I bought 20 little police cars, and if you have any ideas on what I can buy for little girls, please let me know.
Little police cars.
Little police car, got it handled. I bought 20 little police cars, and if somebody, and we haven't announced this formally yet, but we're going to. If somebody calls in and says, I've got a 5-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, I don't care if you got 50 people at the party or if you got nobody at all. If the call load will handle it, we're going to send officers by, and we're going to try to make that birthday party special. And again, I want to build positive relationships between young people in our community and the police department. Because after all, when you're in the grocery store and you say, see that mean policeman over there, if you don't do what I tell you to, I'm going to make him take you to jail. My typical response is, Mom, I'm going to take you to jail. Because do you really want, if your child gets lost or needs help, do you really want them to think that policemen are mean and are going to take them to jail? They need to come running to us, not away from us. So we're going to build those relationships up with the young people in our community. Unmentioned, numerous events. Officers attend that go unreported. So down at the bottom of that, I've got right hand versus the left hand. The concept is don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. Our officers do an awful lot in our community that they don't mention because it kind of takes away from the meaning of doing that. But we hear about them occasionally. People will come up to me and they'll ask me, you know, who was that officer that did this or that, or an officer did this or that for me, and you can't find any record of it. And I'll go hunt the person down and say, well, why'd you do that, you know, or what was that all about? Well, they just needed a little help, so I helped them. So a lot of that goes on in our community. If you want to complain on an officer or compliment an officer, go to the City of Nacogdoches website, click on the Police Department tab, and then there is a complain or compliment button on the main Police Department page. Click on that, and you can tell us what went wrong. You can tell us what went right. And if something did go right and you have a compliment, then we will notify the officer. If their name is known, we'll try to find out who it is, and we will pass that compliment on. It also goes in their personnel file because we like to congratulate good work, and we like to make it cool to be positive, and if that makes sense. So there you go. Just a little line up there, and if you have any questions, I am happy to answer them.
Anybody in the public have any thoughts or questions or ideas for us regarding this part of our program? Oh, good. I saw your picture. I know you've been part of it. Okay, council, any comments? Any thoughts?
Just one question. Do you do the shop with the cop, or is that just SFA Police Department?
SFA's been doing it. We actually talked about it, and we may start doing that this year. We do Toys for Tots, and then some of the shifts, like I said, get together and provide Christmas for individual families. But toys, the shop with the cop has been mentioned, and that may be something we look at doing this year.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
I'd just like to say that, there is no perfection in law enforcement, I know, but I think we're tremendously fortunate that we have you and a department, whole department that strive for that regardless, and are very creative in finding ways to achieve that goal, even if it's not achievable.
Well, I appreciate that very much. We have an awful lot of good people, and I appreciate them, and excuse me, and they're good folks, and I know it, and I'm lucky, and I know it, and I appreciate their efforts, and I
think
appreciate
we're all
y'all.
lucky.
Yes, sir, I agree.
Thank you. We appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
We will take a brief recess and then begin our meeting in about 5 minutes.
Chief Seavey.
And we'll move to open forum. Open forum is an opportunity for citizens to speak about items not listed on the agenda, and we have none today. So we will move on to number 5. As far as the consent agenda, be looking for things to be removed from the consent agenda. Council, are there any things? Nobody? Everybody good?
I move to adopt the consent agenda.
Thank you. Second, okay. Any discussion? Those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Thank you. We will move to the regular agenda. City Council will receive staff recommendations and public input on the following items and may deliberate and take formal action on the item. A, receive a report from the American Red Cross. Melanie Cervinka, American Red Cross. Hello, how are you tonight? Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity to be here and to be able to celebrate the contributions and the role of the Red Cross in the local community. Before I get started, I would just like to introduce a couple of people in the audience. Jeff Burns is our disaster program manager from Lufkin, and he's here to be with us. And also Queen Handy, who's a local disaster action team member, is here. She's many other things as well. And then I would also recognize the Red Cross volunteer, Commissioner Bellinger. So,
Thank you.
anyway, the Red Cross's mission is to prevent and alleviate human suffering during emergencies through leveraging the power of volunteers and the generosity of donors. We do this in a number of ways, such as services to the armed forces, blood services, lifeguard certification, swim safety. But one of the most visible and active functions of the Red Cross locally is the disaster action team. So Queen Handy and her disaster action team assist families whose homes have been lost to fire. In the last fiscal year, they served 86 families and gave out approximately $48,000 in direct financial aid. This fiscal year, they are on track to approximately double the number of families served and approximately triple the amount of financial aid given. The Red Cross is, of course, a volunteer organization. Nationally, 90% of the work that's done by the Red Cross is done by volunteers, but here in Nacogdoches, 100% of it is volunteer. So Queen and the other disaster action team members who work with her often put in enough work every week to equate to a full-time job, 40 hours, but sometimes 60, 70, or even more hours. And that kind of selfless dedication is what we are so eager to celebrate with this resolution honoring March as Red Cross Month. In terms of our local disaster response efforts, some of you know that we have been on a mission to increase our shelter capacity, and our volunteer base. We've been beating the bushes, and thankfully, some of those efforts are starting to pay off, both in terms of new shelter workers and new health services workers who would serve in our shelters. It takes time. We still have training to do, but we are starting to see the results of some of those efforts. In addition, in the past, many of our, or all of our, disaster supplies, shelter supplies, equipment, tools were stored in a large warehouse facility in Lufkin. Over the past couple of weeks, that facility has been cleared out and closed, and a good portion of that equipment and supplies has been located in Nacogdoches in a storage facility here. Jeff Burns and his helpers have worked very hard to make that happen, and that is of great benefit to us, because whenever we are seeking to open a shelter on short notice, that 20 miles makes a difference. We don't have to wait for anyone to bring it to us. We have access to it immediately. In addition to that, Jeff and his crew have also fully furnished one of the shelter trailers, and those large shelter trailers hold enough supplies to supply a 100-person shelter. And those have been stored in Lufkin for a while, and as of this week, one of those, thanks to the help of Chief Kiplinger and also Emergency Manager Self, have worked with the fire department to help us locate one of those at the fire station on North Street. So that, again, will be more easily accessible, more quickly accessible to us in the event that we need that. So we really appreciate the city's support and assistance with doing that. So as we celebrate Red Cross Month, my message to all of you is that the Red Cross is working actively to be a strong and reliable partner in all areas of our mission, but especially in disaster response and sheltering. We are actively recruiting, and we're actively recruiting in all areas of our community so that the workers in the shelters look like the people who come to stay in the shelters. That's an important part of of our outreach. We are grateful for the support of the city, including the fire department and the emergency management officials, and we intend to do our part to create a strong and resilient and prepared community. So thank you for recognizing the Red Cross, the role of the Red Cross in the effort that we're all making to create a resilient community.
Thank you. We appreciate your presentation.
All right.
Any comments from the public? Yes, sir, you'll need to come forward.
I'm currently a member of the public. Probably tired of hearing from me. We've worked at the police department. We've worked with the Red Cross through hurricanes and natural disasters and all kinds of things. Always had a great relationship with them. And but on a personal basis, you don't always hear these stories. In 2020, I had a heart attack. My oldest son was lieutenant commander in the Navy and was stationed in Bahrain. And my wife worked with the nursing staff in the hospital, and the Red Cross flew him home. And he got to spend 2 weeks with me, and while I was flat on my back and didn't know what was going to happen. And I think I won't forget that.
Great services. Thank you. Anyone else? All right, council, any thoughts or comments? Kathleen, you're dressed, so let's hear it.
Well, I will say that we have had a number of disasters that this city has responded to over a number of years, and we really do need more shelters that are trained and activated, because I think right now, I hate to say it, we may be very underprepared if we hit another hurricane or another, even hurricanes where people have to move to us, you know. So I hope everybody listens to your plea for help, including people in churches and volunteers. The training isn't that bad, though I keep seeming to missing one little training here or there, but it's not, so please consider it. volunteering.
Thank you. Any questions, Bo?
Well, I'm just going to ask about the volunteers. Now, the volunteers are only active during the disaster, correct?
It depends. It's up to them. Some of them, like Queen, work every day, and but certainly it's an option to train and prepare. We have volunteer engagement, so they will prepare and train, but a lot of people choose to only volunteer during times of, a special need.
And is that basic qualifications to become a volunteer?
You have to be able to pass a background check. You have to have a COVID vaccine. And, there are all different volunteer opportunities. So there's not really a physical requirement that, there are different physical requirements for different jobs, but almost everybody can volunteer.
This vest would look really good on you, Mr. Bolden.
I think so.
Not my favorite color. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
I know the swim program used to be a big thing. Is that active now with lifeguard training and swim training and that kind of thing?
I have had a couple of people tell me that they participated in that, but I'm honestly not aware of it going on right now.
Okay.
I would be glad to check on that, but I've mostly worked with the disaster response.
Yeah, good, thank you. Does many different things.
Yes,
and
yeah, there are many
including
arms, just like
Chief
the
Seeley,
Service to the Armed
yes,
Forces,
right.
which is, I will tell you that even though I'm mostly working with disaster response, that within the Red Cross in this area, there is a huge passion for the Service to the Armed Forces, and there are a lot of stories like that, and as you know, they mean a lot to people.
Yeah, thank you. Any comments? Mr. Anderson?
No, I'll just say I am generally in awe of everything that the Red Cross does, both locally and internationally. And I love hearing stories of how much city departments are helpful too. And I hope that relationship just gets bigger and bigger over time. And I will certainly do my part to drive more volunteers your way too.
Great, I appreciate it. Thank you. redcross.org.
And I just wanted to mention, I know Jeff is somewhat new to our area, but I really would like Queen Handy to please stand up, because Ms. Handy and I have spent many a night together in a shelter, and she goes out, rain or shine, mud puddles, whatever, to help families who have had, their homes burnt down, and I consider her a dear friend, and I just really appreciate everything she does. And so,
We're going to have a proclamation here in just a second, but I think Ms. Fisher has one more comment.
Just one question. The number of shelters that are not activated that could be activated, is that wholly dependent on the number of volunteers?
No, getting the shelters, you do what you call a statement, memorandum of understanding with the shelter, and so it could be, a rec center, and it could be a church. There are maybe 8 or 10 locally. I don't really think that the agreements are up to date, but yeah, they inspect those for like how many people they might hold and all of that, but that's separate. We could have 50 shelters and not enough people to operate them. So those are two separate problems.
Okay. So then what's the holdup? 'Cause what Councilmember Bellinger said about not being underprepared in terms of numbers of shelters.
We're understaffed for volunteers.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of volunteers have rolled off over the years. COVID was a big impact, and so we're rebuilding.
Okay.
And I know in the past that the churches a lot of times would provide their own volunteers during times of a need for a shelter. I know it seemed like Fredonia Hill was the triage spot, and then First Baptist maybe was first open, and First Methodist. But I can remember at the Baptist and Methodist both supply their own volunteers. So anyway,
Yeah.
I need to help you. I want to get involved and help you, find those volunteers to open those shelters, because I think they're still there.
Maybe I can follow up with a call to you, and we can
Sure.
talk about that.
You bet.
Yeah, spontaneous volunteers are a thing, and they are useful, but the management and the key people in the shelters need to be vetted. We need to do background checks, and they need training. And you know, it's hard work working in a shelter, so the spontaneous volunteers are a huge help. But we really need a nice infrastructure of people who are trained and vetted ahead of
I think we can
time.
get back there. I
think
really
so.
do.
I think so. We've had a pretty good response, actually. People are interested.
Good.
All right, thank
You
you.
will, if you all will come forward, we'd like to do a proclamation, and Ms. Bailey, will you join us? Sure. Yeah, that's right. So, if you will. There you go, that's perfect, okay. Well, we would like to do a proclamation for Red Cross, month, sorry. Whereas in times of crisis, people in the Red Cross Southeast and Deep East Texas chapter come together to care for one another. This humanitarian spirit is part of the foundation of our community and is exemplified by American Red Cross volunteers and donors. Whereas in 1881, Clara Barton founded the American Red Cross, turning her steadfast dedication for helping others into a bold mission of preventing and alleviating people's suffering. Today, more than 140 years later, we honor the kindness and generosity of Red Cross volunteers here in Nacogdoches who continue to carry out Clara's life-saving legacy. Whereas the contributions of local Red Cross volunteers give hope to most vulnerable in their darkest hours by providing for families devastated by local disasters, donating blood to people in need, and providing support to service members and veterans along with their families and caregivers. The Red Cross also helps to save the lives of others with first aid, CPR, and other skills. Whereas their work to prevent and alleviate human suffering is vital to strengthening our community's resilience, the City of Nacogdoches dedicates March to all those who continue to advance the noble legacy of American Red Cross founder Clara Barton, who lived by her words, "You must never think of anything except the need and how to meet it." We ask others to join in this commitment to give back in our community, and now, therefore, be it proclaimed that I, Jimmy Mize, Mayor of the City of Nacogdoches, and on behalf of City Council, do hereby recognize March 2022 as Red Cross Month, and encourage all Nacogdoches, Texas, to reach out and support its humanitarian mission. Congratulations. Thank you. Thanks for your presentation tonight. Nice to meet you. Thank you. Thank you, volunteer.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we appreciate you all.
Mr. Bold, you want this?
I'd like to know more information, especially about the church being. I can.
Okay, that takes us to C. C, receive an annual report from the Nacogdoches County Exhibition Center and Civic Center. Nacogdoches Expo and Civic Center Director.
Yes.
Hello, Anita.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. My name's Anita Scott. I am the Executive Director for the Nacogdoches County Expo and Civic Center, and I'm here today to give a brief economic impact report on our 2020-2021 events, share some challenges that we faced and overcame, and a look at what's coming in the next couple of months. In my report, I'm going to share some really good news, some not so good news, a tiny bit of ugly, but more importantly, I'm going to give you some information that I believe will excite and encourage you. Can we go ahead and just, I have it where it's supposed to just play it on its own. This has got some stuff there. You got it working. Before I get started, I would like to recognize my team. They're not present with me today. However, their dedication to the venue and every event held at the facility deserves to be recognized. They are without a doubt what makes the Expo and Civic Center shine. Operations Coordinator Carrie Clifton, Administrative Assistant Brenda Garrett, and by the way, these two ladies helped me put this report together for you today. Maintenance team members Brad Hale, Daryl Hill, and Ken O'Neill. Not pictured, but equally as important, our concessions manager, Anna Rustin, and our newest team member, Sheriff's Deputy James Sowell. Our mission is the support of youth, agriculture, and community. However, we are first and foremost identified as an emergency evacuation shelter in disastrous situations and when the need arises. Speaking of disasters. As everyone is well aware, many businesses, especially hotels, restaurants, local shops, and event centers across this entire nation experienced a decline in revenue due to the COVID pandemic. The Expo and Civic Center's event calendar was certainly not immune to the havoc it wreaked. In 2020, the Piney Woods Fair, which normally attracts an estimated 25,000 people to the fairgrounds over the course of 5 days, had to be canceled due to restrictions and cancellation. As well as many other events organized by nonprofit organizations, such as one of our favorites, the Dudette Barbecue. So as you can see, canceling the Evans United Carnival alone reduced our day attendee totals significantly. However, cancellations was very necessary because COVID case numbers was high at that time. And then February 2020 rolls around. What do we have but a Montana snowstorm right in the middle of our beloved East Texas? And that, by the way, that was only weeks before our Piney Woods, our 2021 Nacogdoches Pro Rodeo and Steer Show. The freezing temperatures caused cracked toilets, busted water pipes, and the brick walls throughout the entire Expo Center complex. The bricks in the restrooms and storage rooms had to be busted out to access the damaged water pipes. After the water pipes were replaced, the walls had to be repaired and new toilets installed. But the Expo Center team did not miss a single beat. Even though we did not have running water for a couple of days, we were still able to welcome and accommodate over 50 residents into our emergency warming shelter for 5 days. We staged Encore Electric in our front parking lot, AT&T mobile generators in the very back of the property, and Deep East Texas Electric Co-op staged in our Midway area. Plus, we provided Deep East Texas a kitchen to serve 3 catered meals and utilize our upstairs room for sleeping quarters and provide showers for the out-of-town crews who came from all over to restore power to their surrounding areas. And then just a couple of weeks later, we pulled off one of our most successful pro rodeos ever. In March of 2021, the Nacogdoches JC's profit from the Nacogdoches Pro Rodeo event was over $43,000. But listen, I can't mention our successes without recognizing our title sponsors. They're Batters Law Firm, GG Distributing, RV Outfitters, Town Square Media, Kicks 105, Mike Perry Dodge, and Ram Rodeo. And these, my friends, are just a few of the loyal sponsors that make this annual event not only happen, but continues to grow by leaps and bounds year after year. Despite the events that had to be canceled due to the COVID restrictions and the ice storm that caused all of us much anxiety, from October 2020 until September 2021, we were still able to successfully host 58 separate events. 36 of those were one-day events, 9 were two-day events, and 13 were multiple-day events. The combination of these events attracted an estimated 37,000 visitors to the Expo Center. We rented 323 RV hookups and generated approximately 605 hotel nights. Just to highlight a few of these 58 events, there were a total of 7 youth rodeos, 2 equestrian drill competitions, 6 gun shows, a mud run, a comedy show, a drive-in movie, a 3-day canine diving competition with contestants from as far as Grand Rapids, Michigan, a 3-ring Sharon Shrine Circus, a Parker McCollum concert with over 4,000 fans, and a Cody Johnson concert to a sold-out crowd of 6,000 people. In addition to individuals and nonprofit organizations renting the facility for private events and fundraising purposes, our venue also provided a training location for our local and state law enforcement agencies, and the AgriLife Extension also hosted several CEU classes. So as you can see, the Nacogdoches County Expo and Civic Center proudly serves a multitude of functions for the citizens of Nacogdoches. Using a program created by Destinations International, we calculated our direct business sales at $1,715,697. That's gas, meals, retail, recreation, and lodging. Our total economic impact, which includes indirect and induced income, that's monies earned and spent locally, is $2,396,663. One of the details on the event impact summary that intrigues me the most is the estimated total number of jobs supported by our events alone, which in this report it was nearly 2,000 jobs. Listen, I know I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself with what I'm about to share, but since we are already 151 days into our fiscal year, I can already report that things are looking up for our next annual report. As I stated earlier, our fiscal year starts October the 1st. With that being said, we hosted our 2021 Piney Woods Fair October the 13th through the 17th. It was by far one of the most successful fairs we've had to date since I've been employed with Nacogdoches County, which is only 18 years. The profit from this year's 2020 Piney Woods Fair was just over 13% more than in 2019. And as I mentioned earlier, our 2020 carnival had to be canceled due to COVID. However, in 2020, we were still able to successfully host the livestock portion of the fair for the kids of Nacogdoches County. But once again, I don't want to talk about my successes without recognizing two new partners that came on board to sponsor the Piney Woods Fair this past year, and those were Pilgrims and Axley and Rhodey. Together, we hosted a jam-up, successful festival and livestock show for all of Nacogdoches residents to enjoy. Here's where you can get your phones out because I have some dates I want you to save. While I have your attention, I want to invite you to a couple of events happening in the next couple of weeks. R&K Distributing will be hosting their annual Alive After 5 Chamber event on March the 23rd. That will be in the downstairs exhibit hall of the Civic Center. And then the very next night will be the first of 3 nights of the Nacogdoches Pro Rodeo and Steer Show benefiting the Nacogdoches JCs. Our doors will open at 6:30, and tickets are available online at stallhigh.rodeoticket.com. That's March the 24th through the 26th. And again, I don't want to mention our success and without recognizing our title sponsors, because without them we could not do what we do. They're Batters Law Firm, RV Outfitters, GG Distributing, Town Square Media, Kicks 105, Mike Perry Dodge, and Ram Radio, and so many more other loyal sponsors. We have over 100 now. Don't forget to mark your calendars also for the Old Stone Fork Bike Ride benefiting the Nacogdoches Rotary Club on April the 23rd. Dudette Barbecue's coming back. They'll be at the Expo Center on, Dudette Barbecue is April the 30th, and Dancing with the Nacogdoches Stars August the 13th. You can find more information about upcoming events on our Facebook page as contracts are confirmed. You can also access our calendar of events from our website at necexpo.net. In closing, I want to say thank you to the CVB, Ms. Joanna, I think she's still here, for extending us the use of their account with Destinations International, a program to calculate our economic impact. Thank you all. Thank you for your time today. I pray that we all continue to have a happy and healthy year. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. I love to talk about the Expo Center.
Anybody in the public want to comment?
Well, I see that the Red Cross has left, but I will say that back whenever the ice storm came, no one was able to get to the Expo Center, and so I had got the phone call that we were going to activate, and so I made it to the Expo Center, and it was pretty much me there. And we got the first couple of little residents, and nobody was there. And so the first night I stayed there with myself, by myself with them, and I cooked breakfast for them. And then y'all came, and I was so thankful to see the Red Cross. I think Miss Kathleen was there and stuff. So
You do such a good job, and you were great with everybody.
well, it's a joint effort, and I believe that many helping hands together makes a lighter load. And you definitely are that for us. Thank y'all. Anything else?
Anybody else?
I want to see y'all all these smiling faces at the Expo Center, March the 24th through the 26th. I'd love to see you all.
Where's Cody Johnson gonna be this week?
Oh, you missed him.
No, he was at the rodeo.
Yes, sir. He was at our house. He was.
Okay.
He was a couple of weeks ago, and he sold out 6,000 people. And then last night he was at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. My son got to see him. He took pictures and videos for me and made me jealous. But
Yeah, but it's something to brag about, him opening up the Houston Livestock
I agree.
Rodeo after being in.
I think he
Nacogdoches.
might outgrow us.
Yeah.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, Anita. We appreciate what you do. Okay, we'll move on to D. Consider a request by the Nacogdoches Senior Center for reimbursement of $3,015 in building permit fees previously paid to the city engineer, Assistant Public Works Director.
Sorry, folks, Steve couldn't be with us tonight, so
We'd really
I'm
rather have you.
gonna fill his shoes, hopefully. But Kay Sopperman, Assistant Director of Public Works, Assistant City Engineer. We are bringing you a consideration this evening for a request by the Nacogdoches Senior Center for reimbursement of their permitting fees, which they previously paid last fall, in the amount of $3,015. They are adding on to their facility out at 1601 West Austin. It's the old West Austin Church of Christ building. And plans were approved. Construction is well underway on that remodel of the kitchen for commercial food prep and things like that for their clients. They did pay $3,015 for their permit, before construction began. They are now asking for reimbursement of those fees. This does mirror a previous request from 2012, which was approved, where we provide a fixed annual $2,500 amount to them, plus reimbursement each year of their water, sewer, and garbage fees. So it's currently approximately $6,000 a year, which they are getting paid, and this is kind of in that same vein. So they've operated since 1980 as a 501c3, and they provide services which the city might, in another circumstance, provide ourselves. So we are also, as a second part to this, asking for direction from City Council to potentially look into creating a policy or ordinance to address items like this in the future from similar requests from similar entities. So if you care to give us direction on that, we'd love to have that as well. Mike Kelly with the Senior Center is here also if you have any questions just about the operations of the actual Senior Center itself. But with that, I will be happy to answer any questions from council after public comment.
Okay. Any public comment? Mr. Kelly, any thoughts, or you just want to wait and answer questions, or?
Well, you kind of put me on the spot there.
Kind of did.
Mayor?
He's good at that.
He is. I'm Mike Kelly. I'm chairman of the Nacogdoches County Committee on Aging, which you know is the Senior Center. And you know we provide a big service for the senior population of all of Nacogdoches County. We do that because of generous donors in this community, from little old ladies that send in $10 at Christmas to the charitable foundations that are so good at helping us and at helping the city with special projects. And that's what's allowed us to make this move, which is a big step. For over 480 months now, the county has provided us rent of $1 a year on our Harris Street facility. That's a county-owned building built for the Senior Center back in 1980. But we see a growing need for more activities in this, a more active senior population than we had in 1980. They want more than a domino table and Meals on Wheels. And we're able to give them that because of the level of donations that we get from this community. So, and my biggest role here is to see that the money that is donated is spent responsibly to benefit the seniors, and to see that we get the most out of each dollar, which is why I'm here today. In a $2 million project, $3,000 isn't a whole lot. If it was me spending my money, I'd probably just go on. But I'm spending other people's money, and I take that to heart, that it needs to go as far as we can make it go. So I appreciate your consideration on the issue. It's an area, like Mr. Opperman said, where maybe the city needs to get something down for organizations like this. I know it can't be anybody and everybody, but we survive because of the same donors that contribute to the city, and we survive because of the donations from the taxpayers for the city. And I think we do a good job with it, and yes, we're going to see a whole lot more. You're going to see a senior center to really be proud of.
Mm-hmm. What was the source of funding for the new facility?
Several sources. A lot of it came from the Martha Price estate. A lot of it came from Charles Bright Foundation. Some from the TLL Temple Foundation. But we were able to, over the years, we'd set aside what monies we could in the capital improvement fund. And big and small donations. It built up to the point to where we decided, let's go do this. And I don't want to hear the word COVID again, but we started this, and what a time to be building something. Not just because the prices went up on things, but the availability of things you wouldn't imagine, from paint to control boards for commercial ovens. But it's coming together now. If you haven't been by there lately, now you can see most of the expenses for a first-class commercial kitchen. We put out a lot of meals every week for our congregate meals, the people getting together there at the center, to the Meals on Wheels program.
Okay. What will come of the old center?
You would have to consult with County Judge Sowell. That is a county building. They built it, they own it. Like I said, they rented it to us for $1 a year for 40 years. We improved it as we could. Had a great partnership. The senior center would probably not exist without them getting Herman Chancellor, if you recall him. Somehow he found the money to make it happen. Him and a group of friends put the program together, and that's how we got here.
That's great. Council, other questions or comments? No. We certainly appreciate what you do. It's a wonderful service, certainly the meals to our shut-ins and others in the community.
We got a lot going on there, and if you're approaching senior age or not, come out there and see what we got. A lot of activities going on.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. We appreciate you. And Mr. Kirkland?
Yes, Mayor.
How would this be a time that we can direct you to bring us something on how we would do this for other nonprofits, or?
Well, anytime's a good time to do that. So you can direct me anytime you want to direct me, but this is an appropriate time to put this squarely in our court. You have two legal theories you got to work with here. One is your permit fees have to cover your cost of running the permit program, and regulating that system. And you can't just waive permit fees, so that even though people talk about reimbursement or waiving fees, you're not doing that. You're making a grant of public funds in the amount of the permit fees. So there's an accounting thing that happens behind the scenes that most of us don't have to think about. The second piece of that is all the expenditures you make have to meet a public purpose. So with respect to the senior center, that's easy. They're doing things that you would do if they weren't here doing it for you. So we're supporting them in whatever amount you choose is appropriate, and it's lawful. The permit fees is an easy way to measure that, so that's an easy contribution for you all to make. The direction we would need from you is just how far do you want to go with this? Do you want to limit it to simply nonprofits doing the work that government would have to do for ourselves, or do you want to be a little more expansive and use it as a tool to help you control litter? For example, we charge roll-off fees for dumpsters and stuff like that when we do big litter cleanups. And that's based on the cost of actually rolling it out there and taking it away. I mean, there's a real cost that's associated with that, and we often contribute that and have been asked to contribute that more often. The question is, do you want us to add that into this sort of program? Do you want to limit it to just nonprofits, or do you want to be more expansive? And that's something we need direction from you.
Any thoughts? Things that are used for a public good? I mean, obviously, typically it'd be nonprofit, but I guess not always.
Doesn't have to be, but you've got to find a public purpose. Now, granted, we're all very smart people, and we can find a public purpose in almost anything. But there's some legal constraints that I can help you with, but it really is just how far do you want to go?
Any thoughts?
My thinking is I'd like to spend a little bit more time to see, because it might not be every nonprofit, it might be, I mean, because, so do you really need something, I mean, other than the
So council,
non-reimbursement, but the grant of an equal amount? Is that the correct terminology?
it's a grant of an equal amount, and you can call it whatever you want to call it. That's the
I mean, for
effect
the
it will
motion.
have, yeah.
But we don't need another motion tonight about,
No,
okay.
ma'am. No, ma'am, the
Yeah.
motion would just be this request tonight, but, just with the thought towards direction towards a future, presentation to you on this item.
We might
I
handle it.
would like a policy.
Yeah, so the city manager, it looks like you have some ideas about it too, so.
If I have any ideas, I just know that there will probably be coming a request soon to you all. Mission NAC will be doing their big project coming up in June. And so last year, if you all recall, we worked with them on providing dumpsters at their various locations because they had so many homes that they were working on. And so, again, it's a great effort, and we thoroughly glad they're doing what they're doing. But as material costs go up, they get pinched with the ability to actually be able to buy materials. And so I know that Mrs. Perkins will be reaching out to me probably this week and making a similar request. So again, we can certainly deal with those as they come in, but staff likes policies because it gets us kind of keeps us in the
I would like to see you
parameters.
at least begin the process of drafting something for us to look at and consider.
So
And nonprofit would be really, I think, where I would be headed. So I'm just trying to think of an instance where a for-profit would make that request.
And typically for a for-profit, it would be a simple Chapter 380. It would be almost like an incentive package, I think, if a for-profit wanted to do something, but that would be from a development perspective.
Yeah.
And
one of the examples would be the folks that were seeking to do low-income housing. This last one, they included a request for a fee waiver.
I got you.
So that would be something that we could address by policy, whether we would consider them or how we would consider them or what we would consider in that regard. So they can be doing public projects that we would want them to do, and we would want to support them in various ways. And a fee waivers, like I say, they're not technically waivers, but they're easy to measure it gives you an easy quantum to put on how you want to contribute.
And so maybe we focus it more on the public good being offered versus the entity that's doing it.
That's
is
one of
my
my,
guess.
that's one of my thoughts, because I'm not sure all nonprofits, I mean, I don't know what
I
we're
guess I
talking
have a
about.
question for Mario. Do we have a large enough volume of requests for things like this that would necessitate it being done administratively, or can it just be handled by council on a case-by-case basis?
Well, I think what happens is,
It's obviously a slippery slope.
it is, I think that's what it becomes, is a nonprofit learns about this situation, and they have an event next week, and they're paying fees, and they realize, I'd like that deal too, and it's not that it's too late, but they've paid it, they'd like a reimbursement, and that's okay. It just takes time. It just takes time to get
Definitely need to have a timeline,
it just takes time to get it on your agenda, and we just want to be responsive and not feel like, it's just $3,000. Well, I understand that, but I don't have the power or the authority to do that.
Right. Okay.
The other thing about doing it as a policy is it allows you to create a budget line and to start to look at how much you're actually contributing, and to be responsible about how much you're contributing. And I don't know that we do that now, or at least if we do, it's not readily transparent or readily reachable.
And so are we actually thinking about 501(c)(4)s, churches too, or there's a.
So that's something you can tell me to deal with. The
not that I think
IRS status is a good marker for us to use without having to defend it ourselves. It's a good criterion to have. Say, if you're a 501c3, you can ask for this. If you're not, then you need to qualify under, say, a 380 program or something like that. When you bring in the churches, you bring in lots of First Amendment complications to anything we do.
And then there are 501c3s tied to churches too
Which is-
in the town. So there's, to me, it's a big, you got a lot of little tendrils out here.
And I honestly don't have a good answer for you as I'm sitting here of how to
Food pantry.
sort through that out.
Maybe think on it some and come back to us at a later time, possibly. Yeah.
So the question I have for you though is, do you want me to start small and let you all add to it? You want me
Yeah,
to start
I
big
think
and
so,
let
and
you all
again,
take
I
away
think
from
the
it?
consensus is probably talking more about the purpose than the
Okay.
entity.
Okay.
Purpose being public good or greater good or, anyway. Do I have a motion for D?
So moved.
Move, Mr. Anderson.
Second.
Second, Ms. Fisher. Any discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you. Thank you all again. E, consider a resolution joining the state of Texas and Texas political subdivisions settlement with additional defendants, the TIVA defendants in the Texas opioid litigation, MDL number 2018-63587. City Attorney Kirkland.
Mayor and council, this is the second settlement that I mentioned to you last week, so it's $23,000 additional money to us and about $225 million additional money to the state. $75 million of that is in a product known as Narcan, which will be distributed to folks to use for preventing opioid abuses, opioid overdoses, or complications from that. We apologize that we did a rewrite last time to make sure we could bring it to you last time, but somebody forgot to hit the save key, and we'll both claim credit for that. So it didn't get amended in time to bring it to you last week, but so here it is this week. And I indicated last week that I thought there might be another one coming, but it has not arrived. So it's just that one.
Okay. We appreciate you bringing it back in this format, and any public comment? Any council comment? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Moved by Ms. Bellinger.
Second.
Second, Mr. Bolden. Any discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Thank you, that carries. Will we need the executive session?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So, pursuant to Texas Government Code, Section 551.071, we will adjourn to executive session. It is now 6:27 p.m. on March 2nd, 2022. Pursuant to Texas Government Code, Section 551.071, council has returned from executive session 6:53 on Tuesday, March the 1st, 2022. No action from the session, and we're adjourned.